My Neighbor Totoro, the acclaimed Studio Ghibli film that won the Anime Grand Prix Prize Special Award at the Blue Ribbon Awards, the Kenma Mogunpo Award for the Best Film in 1988, grossed over $41 million at the worldwide box office as of September 2019, ranked number one in Time Out from a list done on the greatest animated films of all time, and more. Most would agree that this is a film you do not want to miss. I originally chose to watch this film after finding out that this film was directed by the one and only Hayao Miyazaki, the same director of one of my favorite films by Studio Ghibli, Spirited Away, what I recently watched and was blown away by. Hi, I'm Original Orchid, and welcome back to the Whimsical Whispers podcast where we discuss, me and my co-host Vicious Venus, stories of all kinds. Today, we'll be talking about the movie My Neighbor Totoro. But before we move on, I'd like to warn that there will be spoilers, so proceed with caution if you haven't watched the movie. Secondly, these are our opinions, not facts, but if you have any different opinions or anything you want to say or add, feel free to message us or comment down below. We love discussing these topics with you all, and have cherished and appreciated the comments you have left us in the past, and love discussing them further. Now, without further ado, let's get on to it. So, what is this movie about? The movie My Neighbor Totoro centers around two sisters, Satsuki and Mei, who recently moved to an old house close to their mother's hospital, who's currently in the hospital, and follows the two girls as they befriend mysterious creatures that reside in the forest nearby. As for today's short episode, where I'll be talking about my thoughts, one of the very first ones I have is the ending, particularly questions left unanswered by the ending. The movie My Neighbor Totoro ended with the wholesome moment of Satsuki and Mei returning home and reuniting with Nani and Kanto. Everyone happy that Mei is finally back home and she's safe and sound. And then the credits later roll in, show images that appear to display even more good news, that their mother is finally coming home from the hospital, their experiences with her, and more of the sisters' adventures. While a wholesome moment all in all to end off, I originally felt a little bit off-put. As with most movies similar to this, I expected to find out at the end whether Totoro was or wasn't real, whether this was a figment of a child's exquisite imagination, or perhaps even an older version of the two of them reminiscing about an old imaginary friend who helped them out throughout a rough patch in their life. Like many of these sorts of movies, or honestly, just any details to know who Totoro was. Yet, this isn't addressed, whether he is or isn't real, and I think this is for the best. After a long ponder, we don't know if Totoro was real or not, to us, whether this was just a look to the incredible complexity of a child's imagination, but that doesn't matter. Why? Because regardless if he was real to us, he was real to Satsuki and Mei. He and his friends helped them through a particularly rough time, where their mother was ill and they weren't able to fully express their emotions about their mother's situation, instead being incredibly optimistic and overall just burrowing it down deep and deep into themselves. Further back, when Mei was missing, and after gruesome attempts to find her with no avail, she went to find Totoro, pleading, hoping, praying that Totoro would be there and help her find her beloved sister. In a time of need, he lent his strength to her and sent her to find her sister using the cat box. Another, perhaps figment of imagination. And it was then that she was eventually able to locate her sister and visit her mother in the hospital, giving her relief that her mother was indeed okay, after the frightening telegram from earlier that the hospital had sent to them, saying to please check in with the hospital regarding their mother. I also think this detail helped fuel the idea that it's okay to believe in something, simply to believe. And sometimes we just don't need an answer. Often we find ourselves spending our entire lives searching for answers. Big things like issues related to ourselves, family, friends, etc. Small things like what song is that? Where'd I keep this? And that's 100% okay. In situations that I listed, a lot of the times it would be helpful to have answers, perhaps even necessary. But sometimes, we can simply accept that we don't need an answer every time. And regardless of the output of the equation, we're happy believing nonetheless. Additionally, as I later found out when digging for Kantu's name, yes, I forgot, across the web, I found a detail I missed while watching the movie, a fundamental one. A verse in the Japanese song in the movie which states that Totoro is a deity that only children can see. A detail I absolutely loved, because it displays Totoro as the neighbor next door, the person always there, the person nearby, who's there to help the children that need a little bit of help, or perhaps even a lot, or whatever they need to pull themselves up. And why I'm mentioning this is that it made the ending even sweeter for me, by solidifying that, regardless, if there was no confirmation of his existence, he was real in the hearts of the children he helped. From their belief in him, from him being there, he was able to pull these children up, presumably more than just Satsuki and Mei, wherever they needed it or whenever they needed it, being right there next door, our next door neighbor Totoro. A question, however, that came up for me when that was never answered in the ending was the fact that if Totoro was indeed a deity that only children could see, why wasn't Kantu able to see Totoro? This is a question after learning about the verse's meanings left me very puzzled, and one I still don't have an answer to. I wondered the possibilities, and a lot of times in these movies it's because these children have lost their childlike ability. They've been put into situations that even adults can't handle, and they simply just are struggling with that childlike philosophy. However, in this case, it doesn't seem like Kantu is in that position. Kantu expresses very childlike emotions. He loves playing with his toys, doing childlike things. Overall, just expressing that childlike mentality, childlike philosophy, childlike expressions. And I don't think it's because he's lost his ability to be a child, like in a lot of these stories. Another theory that some people have shown is the theory that Totoro is a death god, the god of death, and that's why people can't see him. That is a completely different theory to debunk and talk about in a completely other episode. But regardless of those theories, pushing them aside, or not even a theory because I don't have one, I'm just going off of pushing aside the death god theory for now, I don't know why Kantu can't be seen. So if anyone below has an answer or theories to this question, let me know in the comments down below. Much appreciated. I also enjoyed the extra details than other characters throughout this movie. As I say, it's the little things that matter the most, and that was well apparent throughout this film. One of the little things I liked throughout this film that I thought made it stand out was Kantu's interest in Satsuki. It's heavily implied that he has a crush on Satsuki from the very first time he saw her and looked away and started blushing. And his actions throughout the film were comical to say the least. For a large amount of the film, he couldn't even speak to Satsuki, instead gesturing with his hands or going or pushing something towards her that he was meant to give her. Or perhaps, like in one of his outbursts where he just yelled, "Your house is haunted!" out of nowhere. One of these scenes was when he was there and he gave his umbrella to her and her sister, and they had taken a stop under a shelter, a cover, in the middle of the road because they were unable to walk home because of the heavy rain. particularly because Mei was with Satsuki and she wasn't able to do it. He wasn't able to speak to Satsuki or tell her, hey, this is here, you can use my umbrella. But he came over to her, dropped the umbrella in front of her, presumably to give to her, and ran away. On his way running home, looking incredibly happy. And so much more happy when she came back to give the umbrella. Of course, he hid during that time, but he was incredibly happy. She had come, or she had given, that he was able to do something for her. Another was May's reaction to meeting Nanny. At the very start of the novel, when she had come down with the suit in her hand, and she met Nanny for the first time, she was frightened. Because as many people do, not just kids, but adults as well, she judged off of looks versus the inner personality at the start. She is able to overcome this, however, and later on, highlighting her character development, as she no longer cared about the outer looks of the novel, or of Nanny, after Nanny had helped them so much. And last but not least, the subtle nods towards Spirited Away depicted when the spirits began appearing in My Neighbor Totoro, which had originally appeared in Spirited Away. Something, as I said, I was inspired to watch this movie because of Spirited Away, so that was incredible for me to experience. So, thank you for listening to this rather short episode of the podcast where I just blatantly discussed my thoughts upon watching the movie. And if you enjoyed My Neighbor Totoro, Studio Ghibli, or just stories in general, feel free to come along for next week's episodes and more episodes to come. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for giving us your time.